The effects of melatonin on Planaria's regeneration after light energy exposure by me, Kareem Dibs. So this is Adam. Adam is a classic high schooler. He's overwhelmed by the stress of school, academically, emotionally, socially, and he needs a solution to this stress to reduce his stress and to stop feeling overwhelmed all the time. Now, to put this into the scope of like everybody in this world, 77% of people report physical symptoms of stress on a regular basis, while 48% report a negative effect on their personal and professional lives, and 33% report extreme stress on a regular basis, all very bad statistics. Now, to put this into words, stress is any physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension caused by problems in your life, work, etc. 1 in 3 adults claim that they don't get enough sleep, and enough sleep is 7+ hours. And some common sleep deprivation symptoms are fatigue, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, among others. And the reason why this is important to my project is that my independent variable is melatonin. Now, before I get into melatonin, I'd like to just address the different levels of stress. Now, there's calm, which is a low level of stress, and this has the least amount of performance. And then there's eustress, which is a very good level of stress. Eustress is when somebody is stressed, but they're also passionate and driven to do something. So that stress only drives them to like bring up their performance and do very well. And then there's distress, and distress is the type of stress that I want to remedy. And distress is bad. It's when your stress is too high, you're overwhelmed, and therefore your performance goes to an all-time low as a result. Now, melatonin, my independent variable. Now, the reason why I think melatonin will be effective is to reduce stress is that melatonin can reduce the homocysteine and cortisol in the levels in the body, which will thus increase the regeneration of planarians. Now, melatonin is a natural hormone that occurs in the body. It's responsible for regulating circadian rhythms, and it is increased in the evening when it's dark to promote sleep, and it decreases in the morning when it's light to promote wakefulness. And melatonin can be taken as a supplement to have those effects as well. Now, to address stress in a more scientific way, cortisol is the main stress hormone in the body, and it's responsible for controlling mood, motivation, and fear. Working with the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands, which is responsible for regulating our bloodstream, our red blood cells, and it's also responsible for triggering the fight or flight response, which occurs when one is stressed and needs to make an immediate decision. Now, the reason why cortisol can be bad is when cortisol is increased too much through the stress response, and there's an excessive secretion of cortisol, and this leads to negative symptoms like tunnel vision, acceleration of heart rate, sweating, fast breathing, increased blood pressure, among other negative symptoms. Now, for the most important stress molecule in the body, homocysteine comes as a result of increased stress. So increased stress leads to increased homocysteine. And the reason why an increase in homocysteine is bad is it can injure the arterial wall, which will cause fatty substances to accumulate. And then arterial cells proliferate to try to heal the lesion caused by the injury. And then that just causes plaque to form on the vessel lining, which can ultimately lead to an increase of the risk for cardiovascular disease, which is very, very detrimental. Now, the test subject I will be using for this experiment are planarians. Planarians are incredibly regenerative organisms that can regenerate over 15 days. They have eye spots, as you can see in this diagram over here, photoreceptors that essentially make them very sensitive to light. Now, to expand on their regeneration, they can be decapitated at 1/3 of their length, and they'll regenerate back to full after around 14 to 15 days, which is quite fascinating. And then the effect of melatonin on the stress planaria makes it so that it ensures sufficient rest for planarians, and that leads to more sleep, which means less stress and more potent regeneration. So the lack of regeneration that could have occurred if the light was affecting the planarians is less of a problem now due to the melatonin. So to talk about the light, light is very toxic to planarians because of their sensitive eye spots and photoreceptors. So when planarians are exposed to light, their growth functions, their bodily functions are hindered, and they are at a detrimental. They're in a detrimental place, meaning they need something to counteract those negative effects, like possibly melatonin. But to spice up my project, I decided I wanted to use different light energies on the light spectrum to expose to my planarians. And what I mean by that is here is the visible light spectrum. You can see the lights going to the left are lights of increasing light energy, and the lights going to the right are lights of increasing wavelength. Now, I wanted to use increasing light energy to kind of gauge how light energy works and how it can affect these bodily functions of a living organism, the regeneration of planarians. So I decided to use red light, green light, and blue light, a good mix of the different light energies. You can see red light on the left, it's a lower light energy, green light near the middle, which is a medium light energy, and blue light near the right, which is a very high and strong light energy. And I will be using 1.25 grams of melatonin to expose to each of these groups of planarians. And then my final two groups are my control group, which are planarians that are not exposed to light and not exposed to melatonin, and my experimental groups, which are planarians that are exposed to melatonin but are not exposed to light. So the dependent variables I'll be measuring in this project are the length of planarians to gauge how they grow over 15 days, the mass of planarians to gauge how they grow over 15 days in mass, and then the number of planarians to gauge the population size and how it's affected by the melatonin and the increasing light energies. So my hypothesis and prediction this experiment is that with increased stress due to the increasing light energy, the melatonin will come into the planarians and thus decrease the stress from the cortisol and the homocysteine, because melatonin works to decrease those hormones and molecules respectively in our body. And that will then lead to an increase in the function and growth of the planarians, allowing them to regenerate normally or close to normal over 15 days. My procedure was that I exposed melatonin to the egg yolk of the planarians in a mortar and pestle. I meshed them together to create the solution of egg yolk and melatonin, so to expose to the planarians in the experimental groups. And thus I measured the growth of the planarians using a ruler through a digital microscope, and then the mass of planarians through a scale, and the number of planarians with my eyes. Now to go into the data. The data for the length showed that the planarians in the no light melatonin and no light groups experienced the highest growth in length. They reached about 1.8 centimeters of growth. And then the red light, green light, and blue light groups all congregated around the 1.5 centimeter group. And then there was the mass data, which showed that the no light melatonin and no light groups grew to around 32 to 33 grams, while the red light, green light, and blue light groups all congregated at around 26 to 27 grams at day 15. And then the number of planarians data showed that the planarians in the no light melatonin group grew significantly through asexual reproduction or binary fission. And then the no light group grew to a normal amount, and the red light, green light, and blue light groups all ended at about 2 planarians at the end of 15 days, which is still significant considering the population did not die out. So to analyze this data some more, the length, the historical data of planarians with only light without any treatment showed that they grew to 0.9 centimeters after 15 days, meaning that the melatonin increased the length, making it closer to normal, because the average of the light energies was 1.5 centimeters, a significant increase. And then the mass, the historical data of the planarians with light showed that the mass of planarians without any treatment exposed to light was 25 grams. And in this data, the increasing light energy ended up at around 26 to 27 grams, meaning that the melatonin increased the mass, made it closer to normal. The number of planarians, the historical data of planarians with light showed that most of the planarians were dead by day 15, meaning the melatonin increased life expectancy, allowing not all of them to die. So for some error analysis, small pieces of egg yolk remained in the water in the petri dish, though this was very insignificant. They were very small and could only help the planarians. The natural death of planarians, it's possible maybe 1 or 2 planarians died naturally, but it is unlikely because the whole procedure was very controlled and thorough. And then more data is needed because only 1 trial was taken. That is the nature of science. And then some human error for the length measurement, since planarians fluctuate so much, it's possible there may have been millimeters of difference, though I took numerous planarians length measurements, so that is likely not an issue. So the initial hypothesis was supported. Melatonin increased resistance to light and brought length and mass of planarians to a closer to normal level. More planarians survived with melatonin. Melatonin decreased cortisol and homocysteine levels, meaning the stress was reduced. Resistance to light increased. The length of planarians was closer to normal. The mass of planarians was closer to normal, which led to a greater life expectancy of the planarians. So essentially, the melatonin helped pave the way for the planarians exposed to increasing light energies to grow normally and to function normally. So to bring it back to Adam, Adam can now be happy and less stressed because of the melatonin, and he can be less overwhelmed. Yeah, live a better life. So for some further investigation, the regeneration of planarians is fascinating and can be used on many living organisms, including humans. It can be used as a way to simulate the effect of neural circuits, spinal cord injuries, eye injuries, strokes. It can be a way to remedy these negative effects using increased research and just the potential of how quickly these planarians can regenerate, and just test all sorts of effects on all sorts of living organisms. Thank you.